lovely, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make the new look 6437. Obviously I'll link everything below. I made it with this lovely viscose fabric. I'll give you a little sneak peek. It was a really nice sew. I did it over 2 days because I only spent a couple of hours on each day. So you could probably sew this up in a day. A really nice, easy, beginner friendly pattern. But yeah, come and sew along with me. So to start off with, we need to unfold the pattern and cut out all the different pattern pieces. So on the instructions that come inside, it will let you know for what skirt view you're doing. So I'm doing view A, which pieces you need to cut. Also make sure that you're taking your measurements from the back of the envelope and deciding what size you need to cut out. Don't always think that you know, if you buy size 12 in the shops that you'd be a size 12 in a pattern. I would normally buy 12 to 14 in the shops at the moment for my bottom half, and I had to cut out a size 16. So make sure you're double checking that. So here I am just cutting the pieces out. Make sure you're following the correct guide and the cutting lines. If it's a solid black line, it's for all sizes, but everything else follow your size guide. Next, I'm going to cut the pattern out. So this particular piece is the front and it says to cut on the fold of the fabric. So I've got my fabric folded in half with the selvages together. So the selvages are at the bottom there. I'm using pattern weights, making sure I'm smoothing the pattern out so that I get an accurate cut. I've got a cutting mat underneath and I'm going to be using a rotary cutter. So the pockets, for example, they need to be on the straight of grain. So basically that arrow that you can see on the pocket piece needs to be parallel with the selvage of the fabric or the fold of the fabric. So I'm just making sure that's even at both sides. This particular piece required 4, so I cut it out, and then what you'll see I did is I took the pattern off and then cut it out again. So just obviously take your time if you're using a rotary cutter, if you've never used one before. So there I am placing the pattern on again and making sure to measure each side to make sure that pattern is on straight. The reason we do this is to make sure that we get an accurate garment that's kind of not wibbly wobbly. I can talk more about this in another video if you would like me to. So here I was cutting out the waistband pieces and I didn't want to waste my fabric, so I just folded the fabric just as much as I needed it to. So you can sort of see there, I've popped the side of the pattern that I needed to be on the fold, and then obviously cut those out just the same that I did the other pieces. Before we get sewing, we need to transfer any markings that might be on the pattern onto the fabric. So I used a heat erasable pen for this part. So the first thing I did was place the patterns back on, and any triangles you have, those are called notches. So they basically is what helps us sort of match pieces together. So you can do this in several ways. You can either cut the triangle out. I find that quite faffy. As you can see, I always think it looks a bit messy, tugs on your threads. So I tend to just do a little snip. So you'll see that I just do little snips on the other ones. But I just kind of wanted to show you the different ways of doing that. So make sure if there's several triangles that you're only cutting the one out for your size, like I am there. And don't do a massive slit, make sure it keeps within your seam allowances. Any dots we need to transfer through, so I basically just rubbed the pattern so that it would break the paper and marked on the little dots. and these will come apparent why we need those later on when we come to sew. So again, making sure that you're doing the ones for the size that you're making. So unfortunately the clip of me attaching the pocket pieces onto the front and back was a corrupted file, and it won't let me upload the video with that on. So basically what I did was I took one pocket piece, placed it right sides together with one side seam and stitched, and there should be two markings, two dots where you're not sewing between, and that is because obviously that's the opening of the pocket. Hopefully that's clear. If you have got any questions about that, let me know. But what I'm doing here is putting the front and back right sides together with the pockets matching as well, opened out, and I'm essentially going to be sewing down the side seam apart from where the pocket opening is again, and then round the pocket bag. So taking it over to the machine, you'll only be sewing the top portion of the skirt, so you'll sort of see me reverse stitch sort of a couple of inches down, I think it is. Yeah, so obviously that's where the dot is from some of the markings we transferred. That's where the dot is, where the pocket opening is. So then you're going to continue then stitching from the other dot all the way down the skirt, and then you'll be sewing the pocket bag as well. So when it comes to sewing round the pocket bag, obviously you're going to be sewing round a curve. Obviously this is a sped up version of me sewing, but just sort of take it slowly, use your hand to twist yourself, and if you need to stop and readjust yourself, then you can. So just do whatever feels most comfortable for you. Also, just to mention, I am then zigzag stitching the raw edges. Obviously you can use an overlocker as well, but I just use the zigzag on my machine for this particular project. We're going to be doing some gathering stitches in the front of the skirt, so you should have two markings on the front, and that's going to be where we're gathering in between. So I set my stitch length to the biggest stitch length that I could, which I think is about a 5 on this machine, and I'm sewing from one dot to the other, as you can see, and I also did 2 rows. So I also then did a row above that. Make sure you're not reverse stitching and you're leaving a long tail of threads, because we'll need to pull those threads later on to gather the front of the skirt up. Moving on to the waistband, you want to interface the front piece of the waistband. The reason it's just the front piece is because the back will actually have some elastic in it, so we don't need that piece interfacing, but I'm just using some fusible interfacing here. It's not the best quality, this, to be quite honest with you, which is why it looks like I'm struggling a little. It was just a scrap I had left. And then taking your waistband pieces, place them right sides together. You'll notice obviously that the back is a lot longer. Obviously that's going to gather up, so just match the side seams together, so the short edges, and sew all the way down, but leave a gap in between the 2 dots that you should have left, should have made on your waistband pieces. That's going to be the opening for the elastic, so don't sew between those dots. What I'm doing now is I'm going to, on the unnotched edge of the waistband, finish that edge off again with either a zigzag stitch on your machine or an overlocker. So again, I'm using a zigzag stitch. So you want to finish that edge off. It should be the unnotched edge of your waistband pieces. So then it told me to press the seam open, where in all honesty I would have probably been better off pressing it open before I did the zigzag stitch. As you can see, it's kind of laying a little bit funny. Not sure why I didn't, to be honest, but I was just obviously following the instructions. And this is the belt carrier section, so fold it in half, wrong sides together lengthways, and you're going to open it back up and then press each outer edge to that centre crease. And this is basically what the belt will loop through, so we're going to be cutting this into sections shortly. So obviously just mind your fingers. It is quite a narrow piece to press, if I'm being honest. I kind of struggled with this bit, just a bit more fiddly. To sew this together, you want to sew down both long edges close to the edge to seal it together, just like that. Unfortunately I didn't film that bit. But then you want to cut it into 4 equal pieces. And then again, there should be some dots that are kind of in twos on your waistband. You're going to place it on the top one and sew across. So you're going to like place it upwards. So you can see me pinning them on in like an upwards position, because then we will eventually fold them down. So when I was sewing across this, I basically went forwards across it and then back, just to make sure that it was well in place. I kind of went forwards all the way across it and then reverse stitch all the way back across. Repeat this with all 4, and then you're basically going to fold then it down, match it up with the other dot. Hopefully you can see this okay. Match it up in line with the other dot that was below it, and again sew across in the sort of same way. So now we need to attach the waistband to the skirt. So to do that, we need to place them right sides together. So essentially I'm popping the waistband inside the skirt. I matched the back up first. What I did is match the side seams together and clipped that in place with a clip, which you'll see me do in a second. So I matched that together. And then I was able to then match the back of the skirt up, which you can see the notches matched together. Should be able to kind of show you that bit in a second. So I'll match the notches together. Now obviously at the moment you'll notice then the front isn't going to match up because it is too big. That's what the gathering stitches are for. So grab a piece of the thread that we left hanging and tug that. I always sit down for this bit because it's just a lot easier. So you basically tug on the thread and pull the gathers. You'll know exactly what I mean if you've never done this before. Sort of once you start pulling on that thread, you can sort of see there. I wasn't really in shot very well here, but I'm very new to this, so yeah, I pulled on the thread and then sort of evened the gathers out, and I just pulled it until I knew that that waistband piece was gonna fit perfectly. Then I clipped that together with the clips that I've got at the side of me there, just to get it all attached together. Also, has anybody else got a really funny concentrating face? Because I'm definitely pulling that face at the moment. Also, excuse the mess. And then I'm going to sew all the way around, making sure I keep the pocket pieces free at this point. We don't want to sew the pocket pieces down just yet. I'm sewing all the way around at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance to attach the waistband to the skirt. And what you'll notice is as well, your gathers should attach in as well there, so then later on we'll be able to pull the gathering stitches out. then I'm going to attach the pocket pieces down separately, making sure you're pulling them to the front section, so you're pulling them on top of the gathers and sewing them in place again with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now over to the iron, where we're going to press the seam that we've just done up into the waistband. This will then get all encased in the waistband as we're going to fold that over in a second. So that's just what I'm doing here. I always feel like at this point as well, I tend to get a little bit disheartened because I always think, oh, it's looking a bit odd. I think because it's not finished, it always looks a bit ratty, but just kind of trust the process. So then we're going to fold the waistband down in half, and what we want to make sure is that we're just covering that row of stitches that the row of stitches that basically is attaching the waistband on. That's what you can see me doing here, and that's obviously why then we finished off the unnotched edge earlier on. So I'm just going around making sure I'm just covering that row of stitches all the way around. I'd also say it's probably easier having a large ironing board than a smaller one, but for the purpose of the video I was just using this smaller one because I couldn't fit my big one in the sewing room at the moment. To sew this down, we're going to essentially be sewing from the front side, and we're going to do something called stitch in the ditch. So your row of stitchings wants to be in the seam, and then that should just catch in the waistband on the other side. And so that's what you can see me doing here. I'm basically doing a stitch in the ditch, and just make sure that waistband is covering that stitching line, or else it won't catch properly, which I had to find out the hard way. In some places I had to kind of go back over it again, but don't worry about that if that happens to you. You know, it's no problem to kind of just do it again. I wanted to show you a close-up as well of what I'm doing with the belt loops, because what I found was that they weren't caught in the waistband properly. So as you can see, it looks very messy, so I kind of folded it over on itself like that, and I sort of made sure that then that was getting caught in as well when I was doing the stitch in the ditch, and I think that looks a lot better. For the back casing, you want your back elastic guide, which you can see I didn't cut out properly, just because I knew it was only a guide. So place this, your elastic, it's a 1 inch elastic, next to your guide, and cut the size that you need. So obviously mine was a size 16, so cut that out. And then you want to get a safety pin and attach your safety pin onto the end of your elastic. And this is going to help us thread it through the back of the skirt. So those openings that we left earlier on in the waistband, that's what this is for. So I'm going to start threading the elastic through. Make sure that you don't lose the end of your elastic. So what you'll notice is that I kind of go back and try and keep hold of the elastic to make sure it's not disappeared within the seam. And then obviously you can see it's gathering up the back fabric, making it fit better. So pull it out, take your safety pin off, and it needs to extend past the seam. So then push it back in. And then what we're going to do from the front side, again we're going to do a stitch in the ditch. I'm going to stitch within that seam, and what that will do is it will trap that elastic and sew it in place. And then we're going to do the exact same with the other side. So just make sure that your elastic's inside the waistband, extending at least, I would say, 1/2 inch past your side seam, and then stitch in that seam. that is almost done. So now we're onto the tie belt. So you've got some pointy ends and a short edge like a straight end. So you want to put the two straight ends of your tie belt together, right sides together, and stitch down the short edge with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Back to the iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press that seam that we've just stitched open, like so. And then I'm going to use the iron to fold this tie belt right sides together in half lengthways. And just to help me when it comes to the next part when I'm going to sew along the long edge. So using that to press. And then that's just going to make the next bit a lot easier. So sew all the way along the long edge and down the diagonal pieces as well that you can see. But what you want to do is you want to leave a gap in the centre for about 4 inches for turning through. So use that gap to turn it to the right side, like so. It's going to be a bit fiddly, but once you've done that, we're going to go back to the iron and we're going to iron it nice and flat and iron the raw edges inwards as well, and then we'll stitch that closed. So what I'm also doing here as well, I did iron the tie belt, but I'm going to do the hem while I'm here. Excuse the dirty iron. So I basically pressed 1 inch all the way around the bottom edge and then 1 inch again. What I also did as well before I ironed it was I just straightened off the hem with my rotary cutter and a ruler to make sure that then once I have hemmed it, it is nice straight edge all the way around. So I kept checking as well, making sure that it was 1 inch. And then what I did was you could hand sew the gap in the belt loop, but to be honest I did it with the machine because you're not really going to see this. This bit will be at the back of the skirt, so that's why I've done it on the machine. And then I'm going to sew the hem, and this is the final step. So I've sewn all the way around to close to the top folded edge of the fold. So I'm going all the way around and making sure that I'm keeping my hem nice and flat since this is the final bit of sewing. So the very last thing I did was gave everything a good final press, trimmed the threads off and then put the belt through the belt loops. But yeah, you will see the final garment. So yeah, really flowy, fits very nice as well. Really pleased with it. I definitely plan on making more, but if you want to see more sew alongs, then please let me know what you'd like to see me sew. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like this video, comment and subscribe to the channel for more content. Bye guys.